Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really zoning in on John D. Rockefeller.
Right, and specifically those core competitive advantages, how he built Standard Oil into, well, the behemoth it became.
Exactly. And you want to get the key insights fast, but still get the full picture. So that's our aim. We'll pull out those aha moments from his journey.
Without getting lost in, every single detail. It's about the why and how of his advantages at each step.
Precisely. We've broken it down into about 7 sections, following his path chronologically.
Should be a good way to see how those advantages evolved. It's really a masterclass in strategy, isn't it?
It really is. Okay, let's dive in. Section 1, at the very beginning. Section 1, the foundations of advantage, early career, and partnership. So picture this. It's September 1855. Rockefeller's just 16 years old.
Yeah, starting as a bookkeeper at Hewitt and Tuttle.
And right away, he apparently loved the methods and systems. That feels significant, doesn't it? Like a hint of what's to come.
Totally. It shows an early focus on order, on efficiency. That wasn't maybe typical.
Then, 1859, he starts his first actual business, Clark, Gardner and Company.
A commission merchant firm, dealing in meat, hay, grains, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
With Maurice Clark and George Gardner.
And they started with $4,000. Rockefeller had to borrow his share, $1,000 from his own father.
At 10% interest, no less.
Which, wow, no family discount there. But okay, let's talk advantages. That appreciation for methods and systems.
That's huge. It's not just liking tidiness. It's a deep understanding that how you organize work, how you track things, it directly impacts the bottom line. It's foundational for him.
And it wasn't just the internal stuff. He got good at calculating transport costs, right?
Yes, really good. He learned about rebates, how logistics worked. That becomes massively important later in the oil game.
Okay. And what about collecting debts? The sources mention his approach was different.
Yeah, persistent pestering is the phrase used. Very determined, apparently quite unlike his father's style. It shows that early grit.
So these early traits, what do they actually do for him then?
Well, first, bookkeeping gave him a real nuts and bolts understanding of how business works financially. Super valuable.
Right.
Second, figuring out transport costs. That built negotiation skills, specifically around logistics. Crucial.
And the business itself, it made money.
It did. Made $4,400 in the first year, and profits grew during the Civil War. That gave him vital seed capital for what came next.
So for entrepreneurs listening, the lessons from this early phase seem to be know your stuff.
Absolutely. Master the fundamentals, the operations, the finances. Don't just gloss over it.
And watch the costs like a hawk, especially logistics.
Relentlessly analyze costs. Negotiate everything you can. And finally, that persistence. You gotta be determined.
Stick with it. Makes sense. Okay, on to the next stage. Section 2, venturing into oil transition and early growth. So, February 1865. This is a big moment. Rockefeller himself called it the day that determined his career.
He jumps into oil refining, which back then was seen as really, really risky, not something established players were rushing into.
And he makes this critical move, buying out the Clark brothers at auction.
For $72,500, which you mentioned is like $1 million today, a huge bet. He forms Rockefeller and Andrews.
And the timing was key, right? Just after the Civil War.
Perfectly timed to ride that wave of post-war economic expansion. The whole country was industrializing, railroads were booming.
So the competitive advantage here is partly just boldness, taking that leap.
Definitely. Bold venturing into a field others were wary of. He saw potential others maybe overlooked or were too cautious to pursue. What made oil so attractive despite that risk?
Well, the sources point to the sheer growth potential he saw, tied to industrialization and those expanding railroads. He saw a future in it.
And once he was in, he wasn't timid about it.
Not at all. Aggressive investment, heavy borrowing, and crucially plowing profits right back into the business. Constant reinvestment.
And he wasn't flying blind either. He was adaptable, gathering market intelligence.
How did he do that?
Had observers out there tracking the industry, seeing how things were growing, changing. In a really volatile market, that information was gold.
So the payoff for these advantages was?
Well, first, he directly capitalized on that post-war boom, being in the right place, right time with the right product.
Okay.
Second, that heavy borrowing and reinvestment, it just fueled incredibly rapid growth, scaling up fast.
And staying informed kept him.
Kept him ahead of the curve, making smarter decisions because he understood the shifting landscape better than most.
So the entrepreneurial takeaways from this phase, what jumps out?
I'd say, 1, don't shy away from calculated risk if the potential is high and you've got a solid plan.
Calculated being the key word.
Exactly.
Yep.
2, reinvest early profits. Focus on scaling the business, not just taking cash out immediately.
Builds momentum.
For sure. And 3, stay informed. Know your industry. Know your market constantly. Be ready to adapt. Information is power.
Good points. All right, let's move to how he actually ran the refineries. Section 3, efficiency and integration optimizing the refinery. This is where Rockefeller's, operational genius really shines, isn't it?
Oh, absolutely. It wasn't enough to just be in the oil business. He wanted to do it better, more efficiently than anyone else.
And the difference was pretty stark compared to competitors.
Hugely. Sources say competitors often wasted around 40% of the crude oil after they got the kerosene out, just gone.
Wow. What did Rockefeller do differently?
He looked at the waste and saw potential products. He used the gasoline byproduct to actually power his own refinery. Genius.
Okay, that's clever. Self-sufficiency.
And then he sold the other stuff, lubricating oil, petroleum jelly, paraffin wax, tar, naphtha, things others were literally throwing away. He turned into revenue streams.
Finding value everywhere. It wasn't just the oil itself, though, right? He looked at the whole process.
Exactly. That's the vertical integration piece starting to come in. He hired his own plumbers to lay pipes.
Why? Just good call.
Cut the cost in half. And barrels, instead of buying them, he started building his own.
Cheaper, I assume.
Significantly cheaper, like less than half the price per barrel sometimes. Those savings add up massively when you're scaling.
Okay, so the competitive advantages here are clearly optimizing resources.
Yes, finding value in byproducts, turning waste into profit.
And controlling costs through that vertical integration.
Definitely. Bringing key services and supplies in-house to slash expenses.
Plus, just this intense focus on every little operational detail.
Meticulous attention to cost saving at every single stage. No leak was too small to plug, financially speaking.
And the benefits jump right out.
Higher profit margin. From selling those extra products, lower production costs.
Thanks to cheaper pipes and barrels, which ultimately meant
Operational superiority. His refineries were just fundamentally more efficient, less wasteful, and therefore more profitable.
what can entrepreneurs today take from this efficiency focus? Seems pretty timeless.
It really is. First lesson. Look for hidden value, even in waste. Can you repurpose something? Monetize a byproduct.
Get creative with resources.
Second, think about controlling your supply chain. Does it make sense to bring critical things in-house for cost or quality reasons?
Strategic integration.
And third, efficiency is king. Sweat the small stuff operationally. Those little savings, that constant focus on doing things better, it compounds into a massive competitive edge.
Never underestimate the details.
Yeah, Dad.
Okay, so he's super efficient. What next?
Section 4, scaling up consolidation and the Cleveland massacre. Right, so he's got this lean, mean refining machine. Now he wants more market share.
Exactly. And his strategy shifts towards actively buying up the competition, particularly the less efficient ones.
How did he approach that? Did he just make offers?
Well, it was quite a tactic. He'd barely approach a competitor, open his own books, and basically say, look how much more efficiently I operate. I can make more money from your refinery than you can.
Whoa, that's bold. Showing them the numbers. Yeah. Then he'd make an offer. Often for stock in Standard Oil, sometimes cash.
And what if they didn't want to sell? If they held out?
Then came the less gentle part. The implication, sometimes explicit, was that Standard Oil's efficiency would eventually crush them anyway.
So sell to me now, or I'll drive you into the bankruptcy and buy your assets for pennies later.
That seems to have been the underlying threat, and it led to this period in 1872 known as the Cleveland Conquest, or, more dramatically, the Cleveland Massacre.
Sounds intense. What happened?
In under 4 months, Standard Oil basically absorbed 22 out of the 26 rival refineries in Cleveland. Just boom, boom, boom.
22 out of 26? That's astonishingly fast consolidation. What advantages made that possible?
Well, first, it was strategic acquisition, targeting weaker players to rapidly gain scale.
Okay.
Second, leveraging that hard-won efficiency. His lower costs were his ultimate weapon in those negotiations. It wasn't just talk, he could prove his advantage.
Using efficiency as leverage. Makes sense.
And third, just an aggressive stance, a willingness to use his market power, that threat of competition, to pressure rivals.
And the result of this massacre?
Pretty dramatic. Rapid market domination in a key refining center.
Wiped out most of the competition there.
Exactly. Plus, theoretically, increased overall efficiency as Standard Oil's methods were applied to the refineries they bought. And, yeah, drastically reduced competition for them in that region.
So, lessons for entrepreneurs today from this, let's call it, forceful phase.
1, is consider consolidation as a growth strategy. Acquiring competitors can be a path to scale and leadership if done strategically.
Right.
2, know your value proposition and leverage your strengths. If you have a key advantage like efficiency, use it in your dealing.
Play to your strengths.
And 3, sometimes you have to be prepared to compete hard. Competitive markets often require decisiveness and, well, a strong nerve.
Be prepared for the fight, essentially. Okay, so Cleveland is largely conquered. Where does he go from there?
Section 5. Industry dominance, the Standard Oil Trust.
So the Cleveland acquisitions were really just the beginning of a much bigger plan.
Oh, yeah. That was consolidating one city. Rockefeller's vision was national, even global. His strategy evolved towards creating the Standard Oil Trust.
The trust. What was different about that?
It was about centralizing control. It wasn't just buying companies. It was bringing them into a single, centrally managed structure. He even brought in former rivals like Pratt and Rogers as partners within the trust.
Interesting. Consolidating management as well as assets.
Exactly. And the growth continued on 2 fronts. Horizontally.
Meaning more refineries.
Yep, absorbing more and more competitors across the country, but also, crucially, vertically.
More integration. Like the barrels and plumbers, but bigger.
Much bigger. Now we're talking pipelines, building their own to transport oil, reducing reliance on railroads, building their own tank cars, setting up their own delivery networks right down to the consumer.
Controlling basically everything from the ground to the lamp.
Pretty much, an incredibly integrated system, and they used this power strategically, especially with pricing.
Right, you mentioned they kept prices low.
Famously low, sometimes even selling below cost in certain areas for a time.
Why do that? Seems counterintuitive.
2 main reasons. 1, it made it incredibly hard for any new competitor to even think about entering the market. How could they compete with standards prices?
Discouraging competition, okay?
And 2, it made kerosene affordable for almost everyone, which massively expanded the market for their main product and locked in that huge market share.
So low prices built market penetration and a barrier to entry.
Clever.
Very. By the end of the 1870s, Standard Oil was refining something like 90% of all the oil in the U.S., maybe even more.
90%, that's practically a monopoly. What were the core advantages that got them there?
Okay, first, the trust structure itself. That centralized control over a sprawling empire was key.
Organization as an advantage. Second, that comprehensive vertical integration. Owning the pipes, the cars, the delivery, it gave them immense control over logistics and costs.
Less dependence on others.
Way less. And third, that strategic pricing, using low prices as both an offensive and defensive weapon.
So thinking about entrepreneurs again, what insights can we pull from the trust era, keeping in mind, antitrust laws today?
Right, big caveat there. But conceptually, first, think about how your organizational structure supports control and strategy as you scale.
Structure matters.
Second, consider the power of integrating key functions. Controlling essential parts of your value chain can bring huge efficiencies and resilience.
Own what's critical.
And third, strategic pricing isn't just about covering costs. It's a tool to shape the market and influence competition. Use it wisely.
Very insightful. But even with 90% plus M, he didn't stop, did he? Section 6. New frontiers and rising opposition. Right, so even dominating oil refining wasn't the end game. Rockefeller kept expanding.
Yeah, in the 1890s, he starts moving into related areas. Iron ore, for instance, and ore transportation.
Iron ore. Why?
Well, it leveraged their expertise in large-scale resource extraction and transport, but it inevitably brought them into conflict with other giants.
Like Andrew Carnegie and steel.
Exactly. And also clashes with the big railroads, again, over transportation dominance.
Seems like the railroads were a constant point of friction.
They really were. There was a major showdown back in 1877 with the Pennsylvania Railroad over transport rates.
Who won that one?
Rockefeller basically won the price war, flexing Standard Oil's financial muscle. But it wasn't without consequence. That victory also fueled the opposition and led to an indictment for monopolizing the trade. The pushback was growing.
So increasing power led to increasing resistance. Makes sense. What else was happening strategically?
Well, a key move was looking ahead. The original Pennsylvania oil fields were starting to deplete.
Running out of the initial supply.
Right. So Rockefeller proactively acquired leases for crude oil production in newly discovered fields elsewhere, securing future supply.
Always thinking long term. Okay, so what advantages kept him going through these new ventures and the rising opposition?
First, that diversification was smart. Leveraging existing scale and know-how in related industries like ore and transport strengthened the overall empire.
Building on existing strengths?
Second, the strategic use of financial power. Being able and willing to win those price wars, even against powerful railroads, was crucial.
Financial clout as a weapon.
And third, securing that future supply. Acquiring those new oil leases showed foresight, ensuring the business wouldn't just dry up with the old fields.
So for entrepreneurs facing growth challenges or new competitors, what are the lessons here?
1. Look for logical adjacent opportunities where you can leverage what you already do well. Smart diversification.
Expand wisely.
2. Be prepared for challenges and conflicts as you grow more dominant. Success breeds scrutiny and opposition. You need to be ready to defend your position.
Expect pushback.
And 3. Always plan for the future. Secure your resources, watch for industry shifts, and adapt proactively. Don't get caught flat-footed.
Good advice. Okay, let's shift towards the end of his active career and his legacy, Section 7. Legacy and prospective retirement and philanthropy. So eventually, Rockefeller does step back from running the show day to day.
Yeah, he gradually hands over the operational reins, mainly to John Dustin Archbold, and he shifts his focus significantly towards philanthropy.
And his giving was on a massive scale, right?
Huge scale, founding major institutions like the University of Chicago, Rockefeller University, funding others like Central Philippine University. Major impact.
And it wasn't just something he started doing when he was old and rich, was it?
No, interestingly, the sources say his charitable giving started way back. He was giving away like 6% of his earnings as a teenager.
6% at 16, wow.
And by his early 20s, it was over 10%. He focused early on areas like education and public health, themes that continued throughout his life.
So a lifelong pattern. But let's talk about how people viewed his path to getting that wealth. It's not universally praised.
Not at all. It's very mixed. You have significant criticism, particularly from the time, painting him as, ruthless, unscrupulous, and greedy.
Ida Tarbell's famous expose in 1904 really detailed a lot of the harsh tactics, didn't it?
Absolutely. She wrote about the espionage, price wars, heavy-handed marketing tactics, and courtroom evasions. It painted a pretty damning picture of Standard Oil's methods.
But that's not the only perspective, is it?
No. You have biographer Alan Nevins, for example, who argued his wealth came from courageous venturing, arduous labors, and sagacious and far-sighted planning. Nevins also suggested Rockefeller offered fair terms to competitors, which obviously contrasts sharply with Tarbell.
Yet more modern economic historians.
Robert Wapples, for instance, highlights the undeniable, relentless cost-cutting, the boldness, but also Rockefeller's impressive abilities to spot and reward talent, delegate tasks, and manage a growing empire. That management skill is often emphasized.
So looking back through this lens of legacy, what were those enduring competitive advantages, even according to different viewpoints?
Operational excellence stands out. That relentless focus on efficiency and cost-cutting is almost universally acknowledged.
Right.
Long-term vision and boldness, his willingness to take risks, invest for the future, think strategically years ahead, and effective management and talent spotting. His skill in finding the right people, like Archbold, empowering them, and managing that massive, complex organization.
And the outcomes. Unbelievable wealth.
One of the richest people in history, adjusted for inflation, a huge philanthropic impact.
Those universities and foundations are still major players.
And he fundamentally transformed the oil industry, bringing scale and efficiency, for better or worse, depending on your perspective on monopolies.
So final lessons for entrepreneurs today, thinking about the long game and legacy.
Well, one clear lesson is that reputation matters. How you build your business will be scrutinized, maybe for generations.
The methods get remembered.
For sure. Second, delegate effectively. You can't do it all yourself as you grow. Finding and empowering good people is critical.
Essential for scale.
And third, think about your legacy. Beyond the money, what impact do you want to have? How will your actions be viewed long-term?
That's a lot to chew on. So John D. Rockefeller, it's quite a story, isn't it? Ambition, operational brilliance, some really controversial tactics, and then massive philanthropy. It's complex.
Absolutely. And tracing those competitive advantages, that early focus on detail and cost, the bold jump into oil, the relentless drive for efficiency, strategic consolidation, controlling the whole supply chain, you see how they built on each other.
Yeah, it was a system. And while, people will debate his methods forever, those core lessons about efficiency, smart investment, knowing your market, managing talent, they feel incredibly relevant for anyone building a business today.
No doubt. Which maybe leaves a final thought for you listening. As you're building your own venture, What parts of Rockefeller's approach, maybe the focus, the efficiency, the long-term view resonate most? And how do you apply that kind of drive and strategic thinking in today's world, hopefully navigating the ethical considerations carefully?
A really compelling question to end on. Definitely something to mull over. Join us next time for another deep dive. Welcome to the deep dive. Today, we're really zoning in on John D. Rockefeller.
Right, and specifically those core competitive advantages, how he built Standard Oil into, well, the behemoth it became.
Exactly. And you want to get the key insights fast, but still get the full picture. So that's our aim. We'll pull out those aha moments from his journey.
Without getting lost in, every single detail. It's about the why and how of his advantages at each step.
Precisely. We've broken it down into about 7 sections, following his path chronologically.
Should be a good way to see how those advantages evolved. It's really a masterclass in strategy, isn't it?
It really is. Okay, let's dive in. Section 1, at the very beginning. Section 1, the foundations of advantage, early career, and partnership. So picture this. It's September 1855. Rockefeller's just 16 years old.
Yeah, starting as a bookkeeper at Hewitt and Tuttle.
And right away, he apparently loved the methods and systems. That feels significant, doesn't it? Like a hint of what's to come.
Totally. It shows an early focus on order, on efficiency. That wasn't maybe typical.
Then, 1859, he starts his first actual business, Clark, Gardner and Company.
A commission merchant firm, dealing in meat, hay, grains, that sort of thing.
Yeah.
With Maurice Clark and George Gardner.
And they started with $4,000. Rockefeller had to borrow his share, $1,000 from his own father.
At 10% interest, no less.
Which, wow, no family discount there. But okay, let's talk advantages. That appreciation for methods and systems.
That's huge. It's not just liking tidiness. It's a deep understanding that how you organize work, how you track things, it directly impacts the bottom line. It's foundational for him.
And it wasn't just the internal stuff. He got good at calculating transport costs, right?
Yes, really good. He learned about rebates, how logistics worked. That becomes massively important later in the